my big things is quotes. So one of the quotes that I wanted to use to kind of frame our talk and our short time here today is, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And this is a quote from Nelson Mandela. It sure has been important for me. It's one of the best tools that I have in my toolbox, and it's something that I'm going to be here today with you to talk a little bit about education and the role that it's played in my life. So my name is Dr. Anjali Forber-Pratt, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Human and Organizational Development. I'm also a two-time Paralympian in the sport of wheelchair racing, a former world record holder. You're going to hear a little bit more about that. And I'm also a researcher and a change agent. So in our short time here today, I'm going to talk a little bit about my story and how I fit in here at Peabody, and also a little bit about my research and so forth. I will say that I have become as successful as I am here today because of mentors and because people who believed in me, people who nurtured me, supported me, helped me to recognize what my platform to be able to change the world really could be, and who instilled confidence in me to be able to succeed. One of the things that I again, thinking about quotes and mottos and logos and things of that nature, you see here on the title slide, dream, drive, do. And this is a personal motto of mine that I believe really encapsulates how I have really shaped my life to be able to become as successful as I am today. So for me, it starts off with a dream. So a little bit more about my background. So as you can see, I use a wheelchair. And I was paralyzed from the waist down when I was just 4 months old. So I was adopted from India when I was 2.5 months old, then 2 months later got sick with transverse myelitis, which is what left me paralyzed from the waist down. Something really interesting, though, about being so young when I acquired my disability was that I had this keen sense and this awareness that I was somehow different. Now, mind you, in my family, my brother and I are adopted, and we have 2 white parents, and I have 2 siblings who are white, and then the 2 of us who are Indian. And we are not, my brother from India, he and I are not biologically related. So just, there was some very strong kind of visual things that kind of highlighted my differences and so forth just in a family like that. But then, lo and behold, you add a wheelchair to the mix, and things get a little bit more different as you go along. Well, for me, being so young when I acquired that disability and became a user of a wheelchair, I actually believed that everyone in the whole wide world had a disability and that it was just a phase that I was one day going to outgrow. Now this, again, goes to show the importance of early childhood education. So for those of you who are hoping to study that, think about how perceptive I was as a young kid to come up with that as my realization, right? So where did that come from? Well, for me, every adult in the world that I had encountered could walk. So I naturally thought that, well, in order to become an adult, that I first had to learn how to walk. But that assumption went a little bit deeper than that. Because I thought in order to get a job, I had to be able to walk. In order to go to college, I had to be able to walk. In order to have a family, in order to do all these things that we aspire to. At the heart of that, it was really that I thought in order to dream, in order to have a dream, that I first had to get rid of my disability. Well, clearly, there are some flaws in my childhood logic, just a little bit here. But I remember being in preschool, so again, going back to the importance of early childhood, and I had this wonderful preschool teacher. It was actually at a college university that had a CDL program very similar to what we actually have here on Peabody's campus with the Susan Gray School. And it was the only school in the state of Massachusetts, the only preschool that was willing to take a girl with a disability. And the teacher said, well, gee, we've never done this before, but I'm willing to try if you're okay with that. Well, it was in preschool that I remember there was a distinct day that I was crying in the bushes because I realized that my disability was here to stay. And that was a really powerful moment. But I had this incredible teacher, again, going back to mentors and so forth, who presented me with this choice that I could either, A, stay crying in the bushes for the whole rest of my life, and yeah, she was that extreme, she was trying to, prove a point, or I could come out from under the bushes and learn how to live my life, disability and all. Thankfully, I chose clearly to come out from under the bushes that particular day. But the other thing that happened during this time period was that I then started to become more aware, and my parents helped me with this, and teachers and so forth, of finding adults with disabilities as role models, to start to develop my own disability identity, which we're going to talk a little bit more later in terms of how that intersects with my research. Well, growing up in Massachusetts, if any of you are from the East Coast, there's clearly a very popular sporting event every April known as the Boston Marathon. And when I was that age, I then started to see these individuals in racing wheelchairs go flying by, and I was awestruck. It was the first time that I had seen adults with disabilities who were able to succeed. Now, for me, at age 5, 6 at the time, this was so powerful that you see here on the right, this is actually a hand drawing that I made in school of me winning the Boston Marathon. And it went even a little bit deeper than that, because you know how some kids have their favorite like recurring Halloween costume, and you're like always the Disney princess, or you're always the ghost. I was always the winner of the Boston Marathon. That was my favorite costume. But it really went to show how deep and how powerful seeing someone like you and being able to succeed really was. And for me, it put dreams on the map. Now, it's not to say that there haven't been obstacles and so forth along the way in achieving your dreams, but like I shared with you a little bit earlier, it led to quite a lot of successes, and it led to being able to achieve greatness on the world stage, not only athletically, as you see here in these photos, but also as a scholar. For me, greatness on the world stage looks very similar to these pictures. As a former world record holder, I learned that if you want to become greater at what you do, whatever that may be, whether it's athletics or intellectual or in work, you have to surround yourself with greatness. And what this does is it raises that bar and it pushes you to excel. That was the case for me when it came to training. In order to get to that podium, in order to get to that finish line as being the world champion, it was surrounding myself with other world record holders and basically my competitors every single day in order to reach that. Well, for me, that's true being a scholar here at Peabody. So Peabody, being a top-ranked college of education in the country, for me, it automatically raises me to that next level to be that scholar that I want to be. So some of you may have some doubts, like, wow, is Vanderbilt really interested in me? Yes, we are. Some of you may be scoping out Vanderbilt among several other places and may be a little bit skeptical. If you haven't noticed it or already, I tell it like it is. And yes, there may be obstacles. And like I said, for me, I have encountered obstacles when it came to trying to achieve an education, when it came to trying to reach the world stage as an athlete. But for me, this is where the part of drive comes in. So with obstacles, I also believe that obstacles are just opportunities in disguise. They're there to show us how badly do we really want to achieve that dream that we really want. So for me, just in terms of trying to achieve my public education in high school, I was involved in a federal lawsuit actually against my school district on discrimination on the basis of disability. So the short version is that I was a 14-year-old who hired my own lawyers to take on my school district. Said, Mom, Dad, I hired myself a lawyer. You can support me if you want. You don't have to, but this is what I'm doing. How that came to be was a series of unfortunate events that I encountered. So from the physical ed teacher in grade 5 who said, that I was no longer allowed to participate in phys ed class because I was a danger to the other students, to the English teacher day 1 of my sophomore year who was taking roll and got to my name and said, well, what are you doing in an honors level English class? It's not like you can go to college anyway. All of these individuals have made me the scholar and the researcher that I am today. And even here at Vanderbilt, I have certainly encountered some access issues, but for me, the opportunity has been to be that agent of change and to meet other allies across Vanderbilt's campus and to strengthen my research as a scholar. So for me, like I said, when it comes to this last part of do, it's how do you take all of these experiences and harness it to become the greatest you that you can be, right? So as you can see here, I've really tried to take those obstacles and to turn them into opportunities. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about how that has informed my research. So here on Vanderbilt's campus, this is just a snapshot of the current student involvement in my research lab. So I have 4 PhD students who are actively involved, 5 master's students across multiple programs, and currently 3 undergraduate students. And we're not going to get to talk about all of the different areas of my research. We're going to hone in on this first one of disability identity development, but this is really to show you that I am intersecting a lot of the work that all of you who are here in this room may potentially be interested in. So the first strand is on disability identity development, then on inclusion, and then also victimization and inequalities in K-12 schools. So I'm not going to go into too many details, but basically all this to say that students are involved in my lab in every process. So from data collection to analysis to scholarly presentations, you name it, we've got students involved kind of doing those across these different projects. So one of the challenges with disability-related research is that disability occurs across the lifespan, and it's cross-cultural. So there's not any sort of easy way to do disability identity work, and so it very much informs a lot of the work that I do and intersects with my own story. So it's an important kind of framing as I move into these last couple slides. So disability identity is that kind of sense of self that you have in terms of a connection to disability. Unlike racial identity, where you often, though not always, where you often have a racial identity model in your nuclear family or extended family of someone, like going back to that role model thing. With disability, similar to sexual orientation, you have to find that community first in order to develop this thing called disability identity. And like I said before, it can occur, from birth, later in life, in old age. There are all of these different kind of pieces across the gamut. So an early part of my work that was published in Disability and Health Journal was a qualitative study on college students with disabilities across the disability spectrum. So that's another important piece with the work that I do, is I try to be as inclusive as possible of individuals with intellectual disability, physical disabilities, learning disabilities, mental health, mental illness, and so forth. And I really was trying to get at what are the developmental statuses that lead to this creation of this thing that we're calling disability identity. From that work, we also conducted a systematic literature review to find out, hey, empirically, what do we know about this thing called disability identity? And what we found is that there were very, very, very few studies that have done this. So out of all of this literature from 1980 to present day 2016, or 2017 rather, the majority of studies were qualitative in nature. Only 9 studies had more than 100 participants. So what that also showed me is that there was a great need for more large-scale, rigorous research in this area. But we also needed a way to actually measure this thing called disability identity. So where this has led to is that my lab, we spent the first year developing a measure, the Disability Identity Development Scale, and we have over 580 respondents who have taken this across, like I said, across disability groups. And what we're finding now we get to do the exciting part, right? So once you have a validated, reliable measure, then you can start to ask the questions of, are there differences across disability groups? Are there differences in terms of based on length of onset of disability, or racial differences, or all of these other pieces? And so for me, I'm excited now that we have this tool that we can now start to be able to ask these types of questions. Down the line, I hope to also expand this work related to families and siblings, because I believe that parents and caregivers as well as siblings go through a similar process of disability identity, but nobody has really been able to look at that yet. In closing, Peabody is great, if you haven't noticed already. The work that I do does not neatly fit in one particular department, but it has been here at Peabody and in my current department, Human and Organizational Development, that I have found my home and the ability to thrive, relying on expertise across Peabody's campus. So this is, across our colleagues in special education, in teaching and learning, in psych and human development, with the Kennedy Center. And for me, this is really where I've been able to take that do to that next level. So I leave you with one more question, and that is, what will you do? Thank you.